You guys, that was just not what I expected. So welcome back to my channel. Today, as you can see by the title, we're reviewing the new 2021 James Wan film, Malignant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this review into two sections. We're going to do the spoiler-free, and then I'll warn you guys when I'm going to start talking spoilers, because there's no way I can make this video without doing a spoiler section. So I'm going to try to be very vague in my non-spoiler section, because this is the kind of movie where you don't want to know what happens going into it. You want to actually experience what happens. Okay, so I'm going to read the synopsis for Malignant. Paralyzed by fear from shocking visions, a woman's torment worsens as she discovers her waking dreams are terrifying realities. So basically we're following our protagonist, Madison, played by Annabelle Wallis, and you might recognize her if you look her up because she looks way different blonde versus brunette in this movie. And that's all I'm going to tell you about the plot of the movie, because I really, again, don't want anything spoiled for those of you who have not seen it yet. If you can't tell what I'm going to say about this film based on my reaction and you haven't seen it yet, let me just tell you, yes, I enjoyed this movie. And there's one particular reason for that, and that's the third act of the film. I'm not going to tell you anything that happens in the third act, of course, in this video until we get to the spoiler section, but just know that yes, I am giving a positive review to Malignant, and yeah, I will go over some of the aspects of the film that I enjoyed without spoiling plot points, okay? This movie takes elements from other movies, and it kind of feels like a couple of different movies combined into one, which worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody, but for me, it kind of kept me on my toes because it felt like it was changing genres a lot, and I found that to be very interesting, and I felt like I was really following along with the movie and I wasn't getting bored. Now, it was a little bit slow at the beginning, but once it started to develop, I was never bored. I was very intrigued by where this movie was going. The second thing I love about this movie is Annabelle Wallis. Her exaggerated acting and reactions to things that happen was just epic. She definitely took the cake for the best acting in this movie. Her acting was comical at times when the movie needed to be cheesy and it felt a lot like a B-movie, and her exaggerated reactions were just amazing. And some of the other actors, I wished that they were kind of on par with how she was acting. I thought that the actress that plays her sister also does a good job with fitting the tone of the movie, and again, it's very B-movie feeling, so the acting isn't good by any means in this film. This isn't like a profound movie at all. This is just a fun, somewhat cheesy, comical, outrageous movie, and I felt like the acting, for the most part, from our very main characters was very fitting. I also really appreciated the cinematography and the effects in this movie. So we had some CGI and we also had some practical effects. The practical effects were just awesome. They just took me back. It was very throwback, and the CGI worked really well for what it was doing. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen some of what the CGI does. If you're one of those people that avoids trailers, I won't say the exact thing that it's doing in this video because I know some people really like to go in blind, but if you've seen the trailer, you probably know what I'm talking about the CGI. It's actually really cool. The concept is really cool, and from the synopsis, you can gather that this woman is having these weird visions, and that's where the CGI works really well in this film. There were some really cool shots. There was like a maze shot from above that I thought was awesome. But let me tell you what my favorite part about this movie was, and that was how the first two acts play out like something that we've seen before and something very typical. You start to kind of figure out where this might be going, but then the third act happens and you realize that you actually could never have guessed what happens, even if you have slightly an idea of what it might be. It just throws you off switches genres, and it's just like a fake out, and I absolutely loved it. At the beginning, I was taking the movie a little bit seriously, and I'm just sitting there thinking like, I wonder if it's this or if it's that. But then it happens, and I could not have been prepared for how the rest of the film played out after that point. And that is what brought this movie up from like a very maybe average score. I would have rated it like a 2.5 if it had gone down the traditional route. And now I think I'm going to rate it more like a 3.5 out of 5 or a 7 out of 10, just for how highly entertaining this movie actually is. Now, I'm fully aware of how this movie has been received. So strangely enough, the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is higher than the audience score, which is usually not the case for these cheesy, kind of like bizarre, outrageous horror films. Usually the audience enjoys it more than the critics do. So I don't really know what was going on there, but what I do know is that a lot of people have reacted to this by either absolutely loving it or just hating it. Like, there is no in between for this movie, and I understand why, and I understand why people would hate it, because there are some aspects to this movie, the negative aspects, which I will get to, that didn't really bother me in the context of this film, but I can understand why it would bother other people. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into the negatives now. The first big negative is the writing or the dialogue. I've seen a lot of people talk about this, so I know I'm not the only one. Even though I didn't mind the cheesy script because of the type of movie this was, I'm sure the dialogue took a lot of people out of it because it was sometimes a little bit too cheesy, to the point where you can't tell if it's trying to be serious or not. But every time I thought the movie was serious, it would then just flip on me again, and I would just start laughing, and I would think to myself, no, there's no way this movie's going for a serious tone. So that's one issue. I think that they could have just gone full on campy dialogue, but I don't know if that would have fit the first 2 acts of the movie, so I kind of see why they didn't go full on horror comedy for this one. Another negative is I really didn't like the opening. I'm not going to reveal what it was, of course, but I thought that it was unnecessary, better left out or put in another part of the film, and having it there at the very beginning just didn't really make sense to me. And then the closing scene was not as strong as it could have been, so I'm not going to mention, of course, what that is either, obviously. And finally, I'm going to repeat myself and say that another negative might be the third act for a lot of people, because if you don't want to be thrown off, and if that kind of surprise isn't welcome to you, then that would ruin the movie for you. So for me, it's a positive, but I'm adding it to the negatives list too because I can see it going both ways, and I definitely think this is going to be a 50-50 situation where a ton of people hate it and a ton of people love it. Nobody's going to be able to agree. So overall, my rating is a 7 out of 10, 3.5 stars out of 5. I was highly entertained by this movie, and just the creativity of this. I just want to know what goes on in James Wan's head, and I just want to know what prompted him to make this film, because I was not expecting this. I was sitting there thinking about The Conjuring and Insidious, fully expecting this movie to go in a similar direction, and boy was I wrong. So this is the point of the video where I will tell you that if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to be talking about spoilers now, and really for this movie you do not want to hear about spoilers at all. So come back when you've actually watched it, and then you can watch the spoiler section of this video. I'm giving fair warning, okay? So I just want to know how many of you guys were able to accurately guess what was happening here, because if anybody was able to guess the plot twist completely, I just want to know how your brain works that way. And if you were able to predict some of what was going on, I'm curious to know which part you predicted. For me, I could tell that Gabriel, of course, was Madison's brother, maybe her dead brother who was coming back to haunt her or something along those lines. I thought maybe he was a dead twin. There was absolutely no way that I was going to be able to guess exactly what Gabriel was. Now, the beginning scene where they say, cut out the cancer, it's time to cut out the cancer, I thought that maybe maybe that Gabriel was cancer somehow and he had split apart from her and he was just some kind of weird monster at that point, but I would never have guessed that he was on the back of Madison's head this entire time. And now I understand why, of course, she kept going like this and there was blood coming from her head after her husband smashed her against the wall, of course. And from that point on in the movie, she's constantly bleeding from the back of her head because Gabriel, the tumor in her head, who shouldn't have any type of consciousness at all, but has been haunting her apparently since she was a little girl, now was able to come out through the crack in her head and grow stronger by absorbing her babies when she would get pregnant, causing her to miscarry, absorbing their energy and becoming stronger and stronger until he was able to finally burst out from the back of her head in that prison sequence. Now that was just something else. That prison scene, that had to have been my favorite scene hands down, next to the videotape reveal where he's just got his arms out. I can't. I know that so many people are going to hate this movie because of this. I just could not. It was hilarious. It was just amazing. I was not expecting it. I needed that. Like, I really needed that. I'm going to have to watch it again on HBO Max now because I saw it in the theaters the first time around. The practical effects reminded me of The Thing and some of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Like, yes, I've seen this happen in movies before. I've seen similar things, but nothing from this era, nothing modern would ever go back and do those practical effects or have those types of concepts in the movie. And to see that again, I just lost it. It was great. Now, I know that this movie is also very messed up. Like, the idea behind this is so messed up and screwed up. Somehow, I just enjoyed it. I am a fan of dark comedy, and this movie felt like the ultimate dark satire at the end there. It was just something else. I was wondering throughout why Gabriel always seemed to be walking so strangely, and I thought he was just doing the weird limb thing that, you know, ghosts always do in movies. But apparently it turns out that that's because Madison was walking backwards as he was possessing her body. Now, another scene where I lost it was when Madison is just like on the back because it's her body and he's just like running and doing all these action sequences. That was amazing. I just want to know where Gabriel got all these martial arts skills and how he was able to like jump through the different staircases, like multiple stories on a building, and kill so many cops. I just don't understand. I think that James Wan just said, if we're gonna do a concept this ridiculous, then we're just gonna go full on, and that's pretty much what he did. The third act of this film just goes full crazy, and he's not afraid to do that, and I have to appreciate that. There's no way I can't appreciate it, even if it took me out of the film a little bit, that he had such superpowers and he was so good at killing everybody, even the police were not safe. I was talking about how I didn't enjoy the opening scene, and it's mainly because of the part where the doctor says it's time to cut out the cancer. Now, that was a pretty great line. It could have been used later in the film, but I think it gave me too much of a hint of what was to come because I saw that there was something that looked weird and not paranormal, so that thought kept crossing my mind whenever I would think Gabriel seems to be some kind of spirit. And I think it would have been better if they hadn't had that scene at the beginning, so it would have been even harder to guess what was going to happen. And I knew it had to do something with cancer. Or, you know, tumor apparently. I thought it had something to do with that, so I kept trying to connect things in my head, and I really couldn't connect things as, you know, and come up with the idea of what actually was going to happen. But that scene was just a little bit unnecessary, and also at the end I really liked how Madison sent Gabriel to that mind prison state where he couldn't actually come out and control her body, and she was in control and she could make him think whatever he wants. Like, that was great because he was doing that to her throughout the film. But the ending part was just a little bit cheesy to me. I know the whole movie was supposed to be cheesy, but I thought that they could have thrown in some more comedy or something, because at that point the movie had gone full crazy, and I think it should have just continued with that tone throughout and not tried to be serious at all, if that makes sense. Not that it went too serious, but it got a little bit like sentimental and weird and reminded me more of the tone towards the beginning of the movie. But once that third act happened, you just can't go back to that. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more about something that I mentioned before, which is that I really liked how you thought you were getting this supernatural, basic, haunting movie. And of course it had that little difference where Madison is like witnessing the murders happening, which also gives you a hint that maybe it's her, but then you know it's not her at the same time because you see the other entity, you see Gabriel, so it's very confusing. I mean, the most logical explanation that you can think of really is that Gabriel's just possessing her, and that would have been a basic film. That would have been, you know, a standard 2012 horror movie, but this movie is not that. And I think for those people who might have enjoyed the first two acts a lot and were like, this is great, we're going back to that time where there's all these haunted house movies and this is one of those possession movies, like they're gonna be disappointed at the third act because it turns out to be something totally different. You're gonna get body horror, you're going to get like The Thing and ridiculousness and action. I didn't think the first two acts were anything great. I mean, you know, if the movie had continued that way, I would have rated this movie like a 2 or a 2.5 out of 5 stars because we've seen it been done before. But I had a feeling that it wasn't going to be that way because I heard that there was a twist, and I had been hearing, you know, that it's crazy and it's out of this world, it's outlandish, so I knew that something was going to happen, and I guess that's why I was kept on my toes also. At the beginning, the shots of Gabriel were pretty much completely in the shadows, so you could not really see him at all. You just saw like the long hair and the weird body contortions. And throughout the film you slowly see more of him until you see like his face, which is completely like deformed and messed up. But I liked the slow reveal of that because at first you think it's just some kind of demon or ghost or something. So you guys, I want to know what you thought of Malignant, whether you loved it or hated it. Please keep the comment section kind though, because nobody's going to agree regardless on this movie. Nobody's going to agree on it. It is just outlandish and divisive, but I love James Wan for this movie. I think that this was just what we needed at this time. But that's about it for today's video. September's a quiet month. That was the only horror that was being released in theaters this month, and I guess it was enough for the whole month, honestly. But the rest are going to be October. There's a bunch of horror releases coming out next month. Until then, I'll probably make a couple videos on movies I watched streaming, or maybe something else fun like a list or something themed. I don't know, maybe a Halloween themed video. We will see. If anyone wants to see a video on the movie The Empty Man, I recently watched that. I feel like I need to both rewatch it and take a full page of notes before being able to even make a video on that movie because it's so convoluted. But if anybody's interested in that, let me know. And I have a good amount of movies left on my watch list for this month as well. So regardless, I will see you guys soon in another video, and thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a comment down below if you've seen this movie before, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!